welcome, David. It's great to have you with us here for what will be a series of discussions about COVID-19 recovery and what it really means for industry. So, going to cover a range of topics over a couple weeks here around the global defense and policy environment, the industry and supply chain itself, as well as the programs and equipment that deliver the mission. So we all know it's a time when experience and having more trusted sources, they really matter in times like this. So it's my pleasure to have you here, David, to offer some of your thoughts and insights and help steer the course for us for what I think will be, in all likelihood, several years of an evolving situation as we all come to terms with what the future and recovery really looks like. So David, I thought it'd be good just to start us off, just to give you a chance to really tee up the discussion. Any opening thoughts, really what you're thinking about these days?
Well, sure. And I appreciate that very much, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts. I thought I'd like to maybe start by offering a little bit of context for the discussion and just perhaps frame some of the issues that I think are probably worthy of additional exploration. The first point I would make is that, of course, in the area of national security, the Trump administration's 2018 National Defense Strategy highlights the reemergence of great power competition as the main security challenge that the United States is going to face. And in order to meet that challenge, the U.S. needs to be able to develop and procure highly sophisticated advanced technologies to stay ahead of potential adversaries and emerging threats. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, highlighted vulnerabilities in the acquisition and supply chains that are necessary not only for the country's economic health, but for its defense and national security as well. In many cases, the commercial industries on which we rely for these advanced technologies and advanced defense capabilities, including from the large defense primes to subcontractors and small businesses, are facing layoffs, furloughs, production cuts, and perhaps worse as a result of the current pandemic. So one concern is how well prepared and equipped is the defense enterprise as a whole to meet the security challenges we face today and are likely to face tomorrow under the kinds of circumstances we're now confronting. In other words, what does this mean for our military readiness, for our global posture, including our ability to work closely with friends and allies around the world? And the answer to that question, I think, depends not just on the ability of the government, but on the ability of the private sector also to work with the government together in order to confront these challenges and deal with various vulnerabilities in the supply chain and logistics and things like that. In addition, and we can get into this later if we have time, but I would also raise the prospect that in thinking about the current pandemic, of course, this is a naturally occurring event. We consider it to be a naturally occurring event. What if, however, this were not just a naturally occurring event, but what if this were the result of a deliberate and targeted biological attack on us, on our friends, allies, other countries? What would that mean? What lessons should we learn from our response to this particular pandemic that might be transferable to a situation where we find ourselves in a perhaps similar situation, but as a result of a deliberate action taken by adversaries or threatening actors overseas? So I mean, these are just some of the questions that I think the current crisis compels us to try to address to see if there are lessons learned that we can pull out of this that are, of course, appropriate as we move forward to deal with the challenges we are likely to face.
Great, that's really interesting, David. So kind of maybe just pulling that thread. So starting where I think we should, which is pivot to great power competitions. How do you see any? I mean, I could imagine a range of outcomes from more substantial policy changes all the way through just maybe how it's implemented, things like stockpiling or some specific criteria. Maybe do you have any thoughts on the kind of potential policy impacts and how you see this maybe playing out over the next year?
Sure. I think there's one particular potentially big policy impact, and that is the issue of foreign sources of supply and how dependent we are on them. One of the things that this current crisis has exposed, I believe, is how dependent we are on foreign sources of supply for pharmaceutical needs, medicines, things like that. In particular, we rely a lot on China to supply many of the medicinal products and pharmaceuticals that we use here, which suggests itself that perhaps we need to rethink how dependent we are as a nation on foreign sources of supply for critical components with respect to our defense establishment. We rely on many allies and partners in the defense area for their ability to produce and contribute to our defense enterprise. That's all well and good when we're talking about the desirability and the need to interoperate with partners and allies around the world in a military sense. But on the other hand, we need to be very cognizant, I think, of whether or not we are risking additional vulnerabilities by allowing ourselves to be dependent on others for critical defense and national security needs. That's an issue that I think really needs to be explored in a little greater detail. We need to strike an appropriate balance between the desirability and, in fact, the necessity, I would argue, of working with others in the defense enterprise for the common security of everyone, and the need to be able to be, if necessary, if needed, be self-reliant on critical defense and technology components that basically fuel our ability to provide for an effective and collective defense.
Great. How do you think that might play out in the next level down, implications perhaps on things like partnerships, co-investment? I'm thinking of the example of programs like the F-35, which are multinational in kind of new and different ways than kind of national interest might really kind of allow themselves to be. Do you see changes as fundamental as rethinking programs such as that, or others, even alliance structures, more NATO, EU level implications?
Well, I think that's a great question. I would say this: global partners, in my view, are essential to American security. There are more than a dozen countries that partner with us, in particular on the F-35 program, in one way or another. And by partnering with others, especially on sophisticated, high technology products that will improve our competitive edge, we can distribute program costs more broadly and more equitably. Obviously, failing to do that simply increases the cost to the American taxpayer. However, we do need to strike an appropriate balance that involves others on the one hand, but at the same time preserves our ability to maintain the integrity of the supply chain if political developments warrant. The F-35 case that you mentioned is a particular case in point. As I said, there are many countries involved in producing components for the plane. It's a huge international, multinational effort, which is good, again, from the standpoint of being able to interoperate in a military sense with our alliance partners. On the other hand, we want to make sure that we have the ability to be able to reach back and produce things should the political environment change in a way that poses additional risks to the supply chain. We need to be able to ensure that we have backup capabilities available. And so finding where that appropriate balance is and striking that appropriate balance, I think, is an important consideration going forward. How does it relate to the current pandemic? Again, it relates to the overall issue of foreign sources of supply. How greatly do they permeate the defense industrial base? And is that an appropriate balance or not?